social animals. They can't live alone. But you can live pretty well by yourself. I tell you, instead of feeling alone in a group, it's better to have real solitude all by yourself.
So resolutions, what's yours? Did you make any? Is there anything different about your life from 2 days ago to now? What I've realized is that, and maybe you know this, maybe it just took me long because I'm slow. But what I've realized is that when you want to see changes, you have to make changes. It's obvious, it sounds obvious, but when you want to see changes, you've got to make changes. Then you've got to decide what changes you want to see and how big those changes are, and what kind of sacrifices and what kind of shifts you have to make in order to see those big changes. So you know the saying, big changes requires big change. That's exactly it. And I guess you only start to realize that statement once you start living that statement. Big change requires big change. So I realized that there's more I need to be doing. There's a lot more I need to be doing for the greater purpose, the greater good. To be a lot more influential, you have to be a lot more influential. But the purpose stays the same. Why do I want to be influential? Why do I want to be well known? Why do I want to have something to say to a bunch of people that want to hear what I have to say? Why? As you get older, you realize that your life, the amount of years that have passed is more than the amount of years that you possibly still have. Now, I'm still young, but you just never know, right? With life, you never know. Nobody knows. God knows. And I think when we look at life in the perspective of, oh, I only have 85 years to live, then your life becomes short. Sorry, that was a bomb. Your life becomes short in your mind. It becomes less meaningful almost, because you're thinking of just 85 years, 80 years, 70 years, whatever the case is. But let's look at eternity. Eternity is eternity. It's forever. Right? And so, in my belief, when we leave this life, we go into eternity. And depending on our beliefs, it will either be on one end or the other. And that's a choice, ultimately. A choice that every man and woman has to make eventually. Every man and woman has to make a choice eventually. I've made that choice. So then what's my plan for the next 40 years? I believe that God's given me a gift, and He doesn't want me to just sit on that gift anymore. And I believe that there's purpose behind the gift. I believe that He wants to put me in front of people so that I can tell them the same thing. That this life is not the only thing that's out there. This life isn't the be-all and end-all. One day you will have to make a choice. And when you make that choice, you will live for eternity. The past 10 years has been a learning curve. It's a big learning curve, long learning curve. Learning nonetheless. You know, you look at people's faces sometimes and you can see how meaningless their lives are to them. I'm not saying I'm living the perfect life. Please don't get me wrong. Not by any means. What I am saying is that there's a bunch of people that lives with just today in mind. So I wake up in the morning, I go to work, I work for my money, I go home, and I sleep. That's what a lot of people are living with now. If you're one of those people that live just for today, nothing else matters except today, then I suggest change it. Change that way of thinking. Change that way of living. I believe that there's a purpose in your story and that you've lived this long because there's still stuff that you have to do. There's a bunch of things that you have to finish. There's a bunch of people you have to talk to. There's unfulfilled dreams. There's unfulfilled passions. There's goals that you haven't seen come to pass. The only time you'll be able to change your tomorrow is when you change today. These are all cliched statements. I mean, I've heard these statements so many times. And until you actually start to make some kind of change, you will never see any kind of change. Maybe you're watching this and you don't need to change anything about your life. Then you, my friend, are ready for heaven. I'm just saying, if there's nothing that you would change about your life, then it means you've got nothing left to live for. That's when I think a lot of people stop living, because you don't see anything else except for now and here. So what I'm suggesting is you put a purpose behind your life, and when that purpose becomes to reach out to somebody and tell them about eternity, I believe that that purpose is so big and so life-consuming that you will never get to a point where you feel satisfied with where you're at. You will never get to a point where you feel satisfied with where you're at. And I think that's probably the place that you should desire to be. The longer you get stuck into doing the same thing over and over, the longer you stay in a place where your life becomes or just feels monotonous. When things start to become monotonous, that's a problem for me. That's a bad place to be at. I'm living the same day every day is a terrible place to be at. We'll talk more when I get back.